Hey guys, Michael the DC Multiverse Collector here, really excited to be bringing you this look at the McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse Darkseid. Now this is a comic book version of Darkseid. We've already had a Snyder Cut Darkseid, which was a pretty cool mega figure back in the day, but we've all been wanting a comic book Darkseid, and here he is in mega figure form, and I think he looks awesome. Right out of the gate, you can see that this is not sort of the more classic version of Darkseid that we would expect with the skirt, that real Jack Kirby look. This is something I think even a bit more esoteric than that. To me, it really evokes the superpowers version of Darkseid with the light blue colours and the big grey belt and the cape. But like, I'm excited looking at this box. I can see that we've got an alternate head, hugely rare for this line, and it might be the first mega figure with an alternate head. Someone correct me. I think that is the case. I could be wrong. Maybe there was a version of Swamp Thing that came with an alternate head, but don't quote me on that. Anyway, an alternate head, alternate hands, and wide cape. So really cool offering, at least in theory. I can't wait to get him out of the box to have a look. So before we get into the review proper, I do want to say a big thank you to Head Start Toys and McFarlane Toys for letting me have this sample for review. And of course, if you're new here, haven't watched any of my videos before, or you have and you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. It really helps me out. Pretty please, I'll be your best mate. And if the video is cool, like it as well. Anyway, let's have a look at the side of the box. On the side here, you'll see it says Darkseid with the DC Classic designation. And on the back of the box, I believe this is the art from the Superpowers toy line. So perfectly matches what we get in the box. I think that's what Todd is doing here. It's a really interesting choice for a first comic book non-movie Darkseid. I think it's a really inspired choice personally. I know there was a lot of hand-wringing. No one wanted this version of Darkseid, but I guess I'm one of those people. I did want this version of Darkseid, and I have no doubt we'll be getting more versions of Darkseid in the future, and I'll be in the bag for those too. So without any further ado, let's open the box and see how cool Darkseid is. Alright, so here is Darkseid out of the box with all his accessories, and for once with a mega figure we've got some stuff to talk about. Let's get the basic stuff out of the way. You'll see we have this tiny little thin basic DC Multiverse display stand. He doesn't really need it, he's quite stable, it's still nice to have it. We also have the art card. You will see it has the Superpowers art, I believe that's what it is, Darkseid DC Classic, and on the back we have a data file for Darkseid, but it says real name not applicable, NA. So I'm kind of confused about that because I thought it was established that Darkseid's name was Uxas or Uxas. You can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments about how I'm pronouncing that, but it's weird that he doesn't have a real name. I thought that he very clearly did in canon, so that's a bit curious. Anyway, in terms of the real meat of the accessories, huzzah, we get an alternate head. You'll see now this alternate head is a very stoic, stern Darkseid head. I really, really like this. I like the paint, I like the sculpt, the red eyes, really brought to life with that shadowing beneath it. You'll see that the blue parts of this are very, very solid, untextured, plain, flat plastic. I think that kind of suits the classic comic book look. But I kind of do like my McFarlane to have a bit more in the way of a wash or a texture just to bring it to life. But this is obviously a deliberate choice to go really classic, really simple, and the detail pops in the face, which is where you really want it. And I think this is a great, great face for Darkseid overall. So probably my default head choice. You will see that the figure comes attached with the Omega Rays head or the Omega Beams head, where he's got beams coming out of his eyes. We'll have a look at that later in a bit more detail. It's a pretty cool head. We also get some alternate hands, which is rare for a mega figure to come with alternate hands. So kudos to McFarlane for giving us what we want. You'll see we get an alternate fist hand, an alternate pointy hand to go with the grippy hand and the fist hand on the left hand. So that's really, really nice. I particularly like the pointy hand, which I think is just full of character for Darkseid, and I think I'll be using that one. Now, as for the figure itself, it's pretty good looking at first blush. Like, I really like the look of this guy. I like the flowing cape behind him. I like the simplicity of the colors. There actually is a little bit of a wash here. Let's bring him in a little bit closer. You'll see there's like a wash there on his lower torso, which looks really nice. His belt is just this solid grey. Again, all of the other blue parts of him, his gloves, his big boots, his shoes, they're all very, very plain. Very little in the way of texture. It's just some light sculpt work there. And that's really, really interesting to me. It's obviously a deliberate design choice to evoke sort of a classic look. So that's been done. Tell me what you think. Is it too simple? I kind of don't think so. If you're going for that Superpowers look, classic comic look, I kind of think that works quite well. Coming in for a closer look at the head, there is that Darkseid head sculpt with the Omega rays coming out of the eyes. I quite like that. These are quite firm. They don't feel like they're going to break off, but of course you should be very careful when handling these. I do like that he's got his teeth bared here. That's really nice. Would have been cool if these came out, but then again, you just have gaping holes where his eyes would be, so I understand why they didn't. I think it's a really cool head for a more action-focused pose. More of this McFarlane, more alternate heads. We love them. They add a lot of playability, a lot of displayability, and they rock. You see he's got his Darkseid medallion here, which sort of holds the cape in place. Not a kind of staple of the Darkseid look with a big corny D there, but I really, really like it, to be honest. You'll see here he does have a cape. It's made of this sort of starchy material. It's got a nice sheen to it. There are wires down the sides and down the bottom, so you can bend this into different shapes. I quite like that, and it looks reasonable on the inside as well. The cape's interesting because the wires down the bottom kind of inhibit what you can do with it. It creates a little bit of weight, so if you want to like pose this, you know, with the wire so his cape is flowing, you can kind of do it, but the weight of these wires down the bottom drags it down. So the cape is something of a disappointment. Like, I quite like it in theory. I do think maybe if it didn't have wires down the bottom would be better, just because, yeah, it really adds extra weight. Look, it won't hold. So these wires up here on the side needed to be stronger than those wires down there, tougher wires, in my opinion, to allow you to kind of get some looks. But look, for what it is, I think it's a really cool look for Darkseid. I'm loving the wide capes in general, and McFarlane is clearly still experimenting with them with different materials, different styles. But yeah, this one is just odd because the wire doesn't seem strong enough to hold a position for long. So that's just a minor disappointment. But in most cases, if you just want the cape behind him, you know, with some creases in it at the back, it'll look really cool, and I'm sure some clever people could remove the cape if they really wanted to. Now, you'll have a look here at his arms. They've got some really nice textured detail, and interestingly, that is because they are reuse from Mongol. You'll see that they're just exactly the same upper arm. All the veins, all the cracks, all those crevices are exactly the same. That's fine. I think it's perfectly appropriate for Darkseid. One thing I will say though, is that the arms on this figure pop off amazingly quickly. Let me demonstrate. Like that. So there's just kind of not enough friction in there. They pop back in really, really easily. But when you're posing him around, you just want to make sure that you're applying pressure so that you're not like levering it out of the socket. So you're kind of just always maintaining a nice even pressure, and you can make the arm do whatever you want. But if you get a bit rough, it'll pop out. So that's an interesting one. I wonder if that's a design decision to stop something from snapping or breaking, or it's just a design flaw. I don't know. But it happens with the other one as well. Just pops right out. Not a huge deal, you just got to be careful when you're posing him. In terms of articulation, he's a little bit stiff like all McFarlane mega figures. His legs will come up that high. This diaper is really, really hard, really, really stiff. So you can get it into a kind of a rough 90 degree. That's kind of okay. In terms of his arms, you can pretty much get them where you want to get them at the shoulder, provided you don't pop them out of alignment, but there's only single joints here at the elbow, so you're not going to be able to do much. There's not much going on in the arms. I thought there was rotation. There's actually not. So very limited articulation in the arms, no rotation at the elbow. His head, let's see. Yeah, his head probably will go around 360 degrees, but it feels really tight, like it doesn't want to. So I'm not going to force that and break it, but the head will not go around 360 degrees. He can look down that much, and he can't look up much because the back of his helmet hits his back. And of course, double jointed knees. Very stiff, very ratcheted. You get a decent amount of give in there. And I just pinched my hand in those knees and it kills. So beware of that. And you'll see here, rotation, rocker. Oh, the toe joint is there, but it is stiff. It's there though. I mean, overall, it's Darkseid, right? So he's not meant to be super athletic. The biggest limitation here is at the sort of the diaper piece. It's just a really hard plastic. So you'll get like a rough splits, but you won't get much forward movement without everything sort of cracking, and not cracking, but like stressing a little bit. So ultimately, Darkseid kind of just stands there, right? Like he just stands there looking really, really cool, really menacing. So it's not a huge deal, but it's worth noting. At the waist, he has a ball joint here, which allows him to rock left and right just the tiniest amount, and he goes forward just the tiniest amount and back a little bit more, but there's not much going on. Like, this guy is stiff, really, really stiff. There's no cut there in the diaphragm, it's all in the waist, so it's kind of You get a little bit of a twist out of it, but not much. I'd overall say the articulation on this guy is probably below average to average for a mega figure. I've seen worse, I've seen better. It's not the greatest, but you've got to look at that in the context of the character. And just Darkseid is not an athletic kind of guy. You know, he's big, he's beefy, and he stands around looking menacing and not the most posable figure. Let's have a look at him with some of his other accessories. Alright, so here's Darkseid with his swappable hands switched out and his head switched out for the other head sculpt. This is probably the way I will pose my Darkseid. I like this more neutral head sculpt. I think it looks really, really nice. Not to say the other head sculpt is bad. Your mileage may vary, and of course the other head sculpt's really cool if you want to set him up in like a fighting or battle pose. I really like the pointy finger, adds a lot of attitude. Now getting these swappable parts switched around was quite stressful. The plastic is just really, really tight. There's a lot of friction. Highly recommend heating everything up in just a little bit of hot water, 5-10 seconds for the wrists and the alternate head, just so it all pops on without stressing the plastic. But like, yeah, I think you can't argue with how cool this Darkseid looks. He's amazing. Just on a shelf, he has a lot of presence. The blue is really bright. The grey is really stony. He looks cool. He may not be your mind's eye image of Darkseid, but rest assured, we'll be getting another version. So it's really up to you whether you want to add this version to your collection. I'm certainly thrilled to have him. I think from a looks perspective, yeah, he really, really looks great. Is it the aesthetic that we all wanted? Meh. I like it. I think really probably my biggest disappointment with this figure overall, truthfully, is the cape, because I love wired capes and I love that this guy has a cape, but it's just so heavy and it kind of just wants to hang down like this. So as long as you're not expecting this cape to do anything too amazing, the cape just doesn't want to do anything, right? And that's the main problem I have with this figure, and I think it could have done without the wires at the bottom and stronger wires in the side. So yeah, that's Darkseid. Awesome looking figure. Let's get on to some comparisons. So for our first comparison, here we have classic Darkseid alongside movie Darkseid on the left and his son, mega figure Calabac, on the right. Now, you can see immediately one of the interesting things about this figure is that he's quite small for a mega figure. Calabac wasn't a huge mega figure in terms of his height, but he is taller than his father, and his father lacks the sort of girth, if you will, the bulk of Calabac. So he's a smaller figure overall, and while he may be a bit stockier than the Snyder Cut Darkseid, he's a lot shorter, and in my opinion, he probably could have stood to be a little bit taller. I think at least as tall as the Snyder Cut Darkseid would have been great, a better choice. Now, you'll see in terms of these two Darkseids, they're just polar opposite in terms of their artistic intent and style. One is hyper detailed and realistic from a gritty movie, and the other is an updated version of a classic superpowers design. So this is chalk and cheese in terms of aesthetic. What's right for you will depend on your taste and how you want to display the figure. For me, it's classic all the way, and as I said, I'm sure we're getting another version of Darkseid from the comics, or at least inspired by that look fairly soon. There were rumours recently that there would be a Justice League Task Force wave with a Build-A-Figure Darkseid, which would probably look a little bit more modern and maybe in line with what people were expecting. I'll be happy to get that if it is a real thing, but I'm more than happy to have this Darkseid, and I think he looks reasonably cool alongside Calabac here. And for my next comparison, here we have Mongol on the left and battle-damaged Superman from the Superman Doomsday 2-pack on the right. So you will see that Superman is much smaller than one of his greatest foes, which is appropriate. I don't mind how those two scale together, it's fine. Again, Darkseid should be a little bit bigger, but then you look at Mongol and how tall he is, and it's clear that Darkseid should be at least that tall. I don't know why he's not. Darkseid has never really been a sort of a diminutive new god. He's always been quite large, and I just think a couple of extra inches around the legs and the torso would have gone a long way to giving him a little bit more shelf presence. Certainly if you pose Mongol and Darkseid next to each other, it kinda looks like he's second fiddle to Mongol, which, as we all know, he shouldn't be. So minor disappointment, I guess. I just wish he was a little bit bigger. But again, depending on who you pose him with, if you pose him alongside your standard 7-inch figures, he'll look plenty big enough. But if you're going to pose him next to some mega figures, there's a good chance he'll look on the smaller side. So bear that in mind. So as you can tell, I really, really like this classic Darkseid figure from McFarlane Toys. I think it has amazing presence. I think they've captured that really, really simple, elegant, classic style really nicely. The bold blues, the stony greys, the great head sculpts, all the little details like the medallion, the cape, I think it's all really, really great. Is it perfect? Not really. I do have some gripes. The articulation is probably less than average for a McFarlane mega figure. Not a huge deal when you're talking about Darkseid, but still worthy of note. And maybe my biggest disappointment is that cape. Cool in theory, but the wires just aren't strong enough to support the kind of posing you would like to do. So anyway, those are my thoughts. I think this is a must-have anyway. I'm glad to have it. I think you should get it. And if this video has been helpful, informative, or interesting, why not give it a like? And if you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. It really helps me out. In the meantime, thank you for watching, and happy collecting.